Welcome everyone to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host Pam. And I'm so glad to have you with me this evening. And come on into the room. Come on in, everyone. If you are listening to me on YouTube, please like the video and please subscribe to the channel. That's if you're on YouTube. And if you're here on Facebook, you know that you can participate in the show as well. And I am going to, while I am thinking about it right up front, put in the link so that in the chat so that you all can participate in the program. All right. So I see now, you know what? Our guest, she was here and now, okay, she's reappeared. Okay. All right, everyone. So these past few episodes of the show, we've been discussing many aspects of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination, her hearings, even her personal life. At our last show, we talked about Black women and being high achievers and marriage and all of that type of discussion that came up with Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination. And so now I should have said we're celebrating her confirmation. I've been talking about the nomination so long, I'd used the wrong words, but it's her confirmation. And her ascension to the Supreme Court only took 232 years and 115 appointments before a Black woman has made it to the U.S. Supreme Court. I have a special guest with me this evening. It is Dr. Danielle Purifoy. I'm going to bring her up hey there, Danielle, unmute yourself. Okay. And Danielle is an assistant professor at UNC Chapel Hill in the Department of Geography. In her very short time there at UNC Chapel Hill, she's pioneered two very popular classes. The first, Environmental Justice, which I understand fills up very quickly and has a long waiting list. And the other class is called Black Geographies. Danielle has a PhD in environmental politics and African American Studies from Duke University, and a Juris Doctorate degree from Harvard Law School. 10 years this year from Harvard Law School. Her current research traces the roots of contemporary environmental conditions in the U.S. South, specifically in Black towns dating back to the postbellum era. She also has written about legal dimensions of environmental justice and equity in food systems. Danielle is also a journalist, having served as the race and place editor of Scalawag, a magazine devoted to Southern politics and culture. She is the current board chair of the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, and she is currently serving on the board of directors of Inside Climate News. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. You are welcome. I'm trying to see if I can get a different layout.
Has it zoomed in a little bit?
Yeah, it's zoomed in a little bit. Okay. All right. Well, maybe we'll zoom it back out a little bit. Okay. All right. All right.
You didn't mention that I'm your daughter.
I didn't get a chance to. I was going to say that. I didn't get to that just yet. I wanted to say that for all transparency's sake is that Danielle is my eldest daughter. I have 3 wonderful daughters, and she is my eldest one. And we do want to say that just for transparency's sake, since we're, doing a little journalist stuff right here. And we always want to be transparent on those things. Danielle, first question for you. I know for a fact that you don't watch much television. So I wanted to know if you were able to watch any of the hearings for Judge Jackson.
I was able to watch, bits and pieces of it,
Mhm,
and but mostly what I did was I've read about what happened, read transcripts, and it was a very long confirmation process, and it doesn't appear. I think I'm probably saying that nicely, that it was fair to her.
mhm,
So, and given our current political climate, I didn't expect it to be a fair hearing for her
mhm.
on the merits of her decades long work um, as a lawyer and a judge. It wasn't. Uh, Nearly as reflective of her experience. We didn't get nearly the kind of opportunity to hear about what kind of justice she would be because of, um, a lot of really disingenuous lines of questioning.
Mhm.
So that is what I read and heard about and how I interpreted that process.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, I think we all, even President Biden, during her celebratory of her confirmation, it really, he pointed that out very strongly about how she was treated, or should I say, mistreated
Mhm.
during her confirmation hearings. Your sister Gabrielle says, "Hey, good vibes."
Hey,
Yeah,
Gabby. Mhm.
and your other sister says, "Hey, Danny."
Hey, Joey.
Okay. So how did you feel when you heard that Judge Jackson was officially confirmed?
Well, I think first of all, I was really happy for her.
Mhm.
It's very clear that she has worked for decades to get to this point. Anyone who has aspirations to become a Supreme Court justice has to walk a really, um, and this is anyone as a general matter, right? Has to
Mhm.
walk uh, a tightrope,
Mhm.
has to walk a very specific kind of pathway as an attorney and as a judge. Uh, has to be careful about, or thoughtful at the very least, about um, how to characterize the decisions that they make.
Mhm.
Has to um, I think, account, or at the very least think about, right, when they make decisions um, that will be, in public record, and that they will have to account for in a kind of hearing process during the nomination process for the Supreme Court. Um, yeah, how they will have to account for their decisions.
Mhm.
Um, but for a Black woman, to become Supreme Court justice means that that tightrope is threadbare. It is really, really thin. So I was um, happy for her personally that she achieved the goal that she wanted to achieve, and also really, I think I felt in some ways some grief about all of the things that she likely had to endure leading up, well before, right? She got the nomination, and then what she endured during the nomination process. And then to join the Supreme Court during a time when the nation's institutions, um, which were never created for the liberation of Black people, are being imperiled themselves by the very people for whom, right, the legal system was created to benefit. So this white supremacist, uh, insurrectionist uh, form of politics that we are dealing with once again in this country is a pretty terrible time, right, to become the first Black woman Supreme Court justice.
Mhm.
So I feel grief for her stepping into this particular position in this particular climate. while I'm happy for her personally.
Yeah. I know, it's interesting. I was like ecstatic, over the moon, tearful. I was crying when she got nominated. Then I got mad and was crying during the hearings. And then when she was confirmed and was at the White House, and and she did the famous Maya Angelou portion of the "Still I Rise" poem, that she is the dream and the hope of the slave, and I just
Mhm.
lost it, and a lot of other people lost it too. But immediately I thought, oh my God, what's next? Because what we know is that despite these huge lifts that has happened. Look
Mm.
at Vice President Kamala Harris, and look at her. Despite all of this progression that we've had, and look at President Obama, we still have all of these laws and things that are happening to us,
Mm.
against us, and against women. So it's really a very, very peculiar time. Um, I want to I have written in my notes, given the makeup of the court, she'll
Mhm.
be writing some awesome dissensions, I think, for the most part. And so, you know what? Just before we get into some more questioning, I want to share a video from another YouTuber that covered some ground about what happened with her in the nomination process. Hold on. Okay. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay. Let me see here. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. Let's see if it'll work. I did something. Now, see, when I was practicing it, it worked. Of course. Here it is. Okay.
The extreme racism
You see
being
it?
launched at Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Here's what Mitch McConnell said in defending his no vote for the Supreme Court nominee.
The Judiciary Committee has completed its hearing for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. I enjoyed meeting the nominee. I went into the Senate's process with an open mind, but after studying the nominee's record and watching her performance this week, I cannot and will not support Judge Jackson for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. First, Judge Jackson refuses to reject the fringe position that Democrats should try to pack the Supreme Court. I assumed this would be an easy softball for Judge Jackson, but it wasn't.
You know, the silliness of it all. A Supreme Court justice has no bearing on if Congress decides to expand the court. As a matter of fact, it's constitutionally allowable. And the Supreme Court has no bearing on it whatsoever. So because of something that she would never have to even interpret, something she would never have to do, a decision she would never have to make, Mitch McConnell says, I just can't do it. But he voted to approve this guy.
Sometimes I had too many beers. I liked beer. I still like beer. Had beers, have some beers. One beer, drink beer, drinks beer, drank beer, and drinking beer.
You've got nothing to apologize for.
You've probably had beers, Senator.
Each week, Ralph Club, biggest contributor.
I got a weak stomach, whether it's with beer.
You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. None. She's as much of a victim as you are.
I like
You haven't
beer.
answered that.
I like beer. I don't know if you do.
Okay.
You like beer, Senator, or not? What do you like to drink?
Next one.
Hanging out and having some beers with friends, which I gladly do, and which I fully embrace.
Have you, I don't know if it's buffed or boofed. How do you pronounce that?
That refers to flatulence. We were 16.
When you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsay said hello.
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know. Have you?
You see what I'm talking about? That guy got approved by those same senators who have said, "Oh, we cannot approve Judge Jackson because he has no opinion on."
Okay. So you can unmute yourself, Danielle. So I played that specifically so that you could see that was our last nominee to the Supreme Court, and he made it through, despite having an allegation against him for rape, and it didn't come out when it had come out much earlier, when his name had been lifted to go into the Supreme Court, according to Ms. Ford, and his behavior, his comportment and stuff was awful. That was really a good part of what we saw, and yet, if with the questioning that Judge Jackson had, her comportment remained steady and easy. Had she shown any aggressiveness as Kavanaugh had, you think she would have made it?
No, yeah, she certainly wouldn't have made it. And that's because that arena, like, the whole of our legal and political system in the United States was created as a space for white men, right? As a space for where white men could enter into political debate and agreement and disagreement, and shape laws how they saw fit. The challenge right now, the challenge has always been when someone who the system was not created for attempts to enter the system, however perfectly they follow the stated rules and practices and protocols of that system. And so that's what we observed, right, in the difference between now Justice Brett Kavanaugh and future Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing. One thing that we know 100% for sure that we can absolutely say is that Judge Jackson would not be our future Supreme Court justice if it were not for the vote. How we voted in I can't even remember when we voted in 2020. Everything seems to be running together. If we didn't vote the way we did in 2020, and we have just the narrowest of margins in the Senate in particular, but usually in a midterm election, unfortunately, those that are in power traditionally lose power. And I cannot stress enough, this is the whole reason why I started this show, is that we have to educate people the power of their vote, to plan their vote so that we can continue to have victories. And I want your opinion on that, Danielle. What's next? What's the next thing that we've got to do before we get into something else?
The next thing we have to do this year, or the next thing we have to do
this year, because we are in midterms. We are in midterms, period.
Well, I think that it's certainly important for us to mobilize to vote in the midterms. that's important to maintain, right? I mean, as you say, right, we have the thinnest of margins in the Senate. The margins aren't that great in the House either. And um, and to even maintain some part of that margin, we will need to vote in large numbers in the midterms, which is not typically an election that people vote in large numbers. Um, but I think that the conversations or the centralizing of voting is challenging given the system that we're in. So the vote, I would never ever say, you will never hear me say that voting doesn't matter. Um, it absolutely does, and it is a key reason why Ketanji Brown Jackson is on the court itself. On its own, it's a central piece, but there was a whole lot more that was um, behind that, including her own stellar record as a lawyer and as a judge. So much so that they couldn't find, right,
Mhm.
the GOP really couldn't find much um, to try to discredit or undermine her, right? That
Mhm.
is how tightly, right, closely she has walked that tightrope. Um, but I think that the challenge that I think we face today more than this question of voting is what system are we voting for? I think a lot of folks are challenged by this this question because we are closing in on 60 years since the Black Freedom Rights Movement or Civil Rights Movement, as some folks call it, which cemented, we thought permanently, the vote for Black people. And a lot of people died for that,
Mhm.
right? A lot of people fought, lost their lives, and lost various forms, right, of their futures during that fight. And we have to assess what that fight has gotten us materially and also socially in this country. Um, so there have been undoubtedly some gains within this existing system that we have, right? We have more Black folks, people of color representing us in various levels of government as attorneys, right? In spaces that would have been unimaginable 60, 70 years ago.
Mhm.
That's true. Um, but the racial wealth gap is
Mhm.
massive, right?
Yes.
Black people who are among the most dispossessed, right? So that's LGBT folks, particularly Black trans folks, folks who don't have money,
Mhm.
who are, financially poor.
Uh-huh.
Um, they have not, the last 60 years hasn't looked great for them. And it got worse after deindustrialization. So, that struggle has continued into this moment, and COVID was another huge blow in that regard. So, and of course, mass incarceration and
Yeah.
neoliberalism,
So many, and on and on.
on and on, right? And so at this point, the question is, and that's happened under Democratic and Republican administrations.
Right.
So it is not about party and it is not about the vote per se, it's about the system that we're in. So the system that Ketanji Brown Jackson is inheriting is, in a sense, as Martin Luther King says, a burning house, essentially. She is integrating into a house that is actually on fire, right? Like that, we had an insurrection just over a year ago by
Mhm.
people who actually should be the ones defending the system because it actually benefits them.
Right.
Um, and the reason why they are rising up is because people who look like you and me and people who people like Ketanji Brown Jackson have the audacity to have learned this system and know how it works better than they do. right?
Yes.
And
And
that's
so they've
yeah,
created all these
yeah,
bizarre narratives with QAnon and
right,
everything else, and it's
right.
just insane, and I don't know, I'm not quite sure I know how you combat that. I really don't know. I wanna read this, chat here that we got from Judy Davis. It says, "If McConnell hadn't changed the rules for SCOTUS nominees, Judge Jackson would have been filibustered in the Senate."
Yeah, I mean, when you shift rules for, I mean, this is why, the filibuster rule is really complex for Democrats to intervene in right now. For any party, if they intervene on a rule to benefit them,
Mhm,
when the opposite party takes control, if they take control again, they get to benefit in similar ways.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's true, and so it really, to me, right, like begs the question of what kind of system um, do we actually want for people living in this land we call the United States? And that's hard. That's hard. That's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. The United States is a global superpower. Um, it its system of government has been exported and attempted to be replicated right across the world.
Right.
Um, but for the lived realities, right, of people on the ground here and people who have um, experienced US imperialism abroad, um, this system is um, it's fundamentally right demonstrates time and again that it isn't meant for the transformation right of the lives of folks who have been most marginalized in this country. So those things are important. So the system we have right now, what Ketanji Brown Jackson can do on the Supreme Court, which is a very, very important thing, um, is a whole lot of harm reduction, right? Um,
Mhm.
she has, I was looking earlier about the various cases she has coming her way in the next, um,
Court
uh,
docket.
right, in the next court docket. So race conscious admissions at universities, um, public accommodations essentially for LGBTQ folks of our religious religious rights cases, um, including, and then also voting rights, right,
Yes.
gerrymandering cases that are coming down the pipe, um, including, attempts to cut back even further on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. We know, right, about a decade ago, led by Chief Justice John Roberts, right, that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was
Got it.
vetted. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was also cut back on uh, Black and brown folks, people of colors, right, ability to challenge voting restrictions. So that happened a decade ago, and now we're poised for more of that. And so, we anticipate that she will vote in a direction that will reduce the harm to um, communities of color, all right, and particularly Black folks. Um, but that's not transformation, right? And right now we're in a space. Oh, one of the cases that she's also poised to hear. Oh, actually, this is Justice Breyer's. One of the last cases, maybe that he'll hear, is about this fight to limit EPA's action on climate change.
Oh boy.
So we are in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been releasing report after report, right, about how we're going to be experiencing some really um, devastating impacts
Yes.
here and globally over the next 30 years, that those are locked in at this point. And what we have to do now, all we can do now, is to try to save us from what happens after that.
Well,
and what
it's
should happen.
crazy. We never did listen to Al Gore. I mean, it's like I can just see Al Gore, what is it, 30, 40 years ago, talking about climate change and stuff, and everybody was laughing at him, and it was just ridiculous. And now I don't what is Al Gore doing somewhere chilling? I guess he's just relaxing. I guess I need to ask your friend, our girl Catherine Coleman Flowers, what he's doing.
Yeah, I think he's still being outspoken about climate change.
I don't hear it. We
And
don't hear it. Doesn't get any media attention,
well, yeah,
unfortunately.
that's another matter.
Yeah. I
But I
wouldn't
mean, all that to say, it is just that we're at a moment where of existential crisis, right? Literal
yeah.
existential crisis, as well as political and social crisis. And um, this system is not going to get us to a place that takes us beyond that. And that is a really devastating realization, right? Because this is the system that we have. Um,
Mhm.
and it hasn't, there are ways that it has bent and stretched in various ways, but fundamentally it hasn't changed in a way that would for instance help us to survive past the next 30 years
Mhm.
of climate change. So yeah, and I mean, I know I probably sound like a downer here. And again, like I said, I'm very happy for um Judge Jackson. I think she's obviously um brilliant and well deserving of this post. And for the rest of us, if we're talking about next steps, what we should be thinking about, and it's not, these are things that people have been thinking about for a very long time is, uh, yeah, what do we do fundamentally about this structure that we're in?
Mhm. Well, let me read a couple more chats. We've got Latrice Davis said, so would Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett. They weren't close to 60 votes either. And then she says, Jimmy Carter, yep, installed solar panels on the White House. And God, that was in the 70s.
Mhm.
On the White House roof when he was president. Ronald Reagan removed them after he was elected. Time has proven Carter to be the president, the prescient. And
Mhm.
then Judy says, that's true, Latrice. The reality of having a divided Senate or the lack of a supermajority.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked previously, Danielle, about Judge Jackson, um, Judge Jackson, and you mentioned that all too important term that's been thrown around at school board meetings inappropriately, and that is critical race theory. Remember when we were chatting, and you
Mhm.
were saying this is the personification of, critical race theory. You were saying that the very thing that she the very thing that she has endured and what have you is basically what Professor Derek Bell, why he came up with critical race theory. And so
Right.
it says we have talked about the definition of CRT or critical race theory on the show coined by the late great Professor Derek Bell at Harvard Law. And tell us, you remember what we talked about when you talked about that term? And didn't you have a class with Dr. Lanny Guinier on
Mhm.
critical race theory?
Yeah. So I think first of all, one of the first things that that Black women, and they probably understand this long before they go to law school. In my case, I had some sense of it, but it really became concrete to me the first time um, in my first year in law school, and that is um, The total absence of the even conceptualization of Black women in the legal system. So there's this what it means to be Black in our Constitution, what it means to be Black our in our statutes, really has historically been centered around Black men. That has been Black men were the first to be able to vote post in the Reconstruction era. Black women were not cognizable, right, in the law as people who could vote. And this is, of course, in part because white women weren't cognizable within that as well. And so critical race theory, right, is an umbrella. It's an umbrella of a wide range of scholarship that started in the legal academy to try to understand the positionality of people who were not meant or not for whom our legal system was not created, right? And Black women, even more so, far more so, right, than Black men, like really do not exist at the even in the sort of amended versions of our Constitution, of our legal framework. And so that's why you have folks like Kimberly Williams Crenshaw coining the term intersectionality, because there's no way in the law, and it's still the case, for Black women to assert themselves as having experienced a legal harm as Black women, right? You can experience a legal harm as a man, and you can experience legal harm as a Black person, but not as a fully right, like Black woman. And that's really important for thinking about what someone like Ketanji Brown Jackson's approach to law might be, right? How does someone approach a law that doesn't recognize her, right? Intersectionality is a core part of what we talk about when we talk about critical race theory. It's one facet, it's one theory within the sort of genre. And Ketanji Brown Jackson existing, just her existence on the Supreme Court, heralds this contradiction of sorts within our legal system that she has to navigate, right? And it will have to navigate in a way that no other Black woman has had to navigate before. So I think that's really important. Yeah, and that's the tie-in, I think, to critical race theory, real critical race theory. I mean, the GOP, I think some of them actually understand what it is, and they understand why it is a threat to the core of the legal system, because it challenges it fundamentally, right? It challenges how it is structured. And they don't want that. They don't want us to be educated about the real history of this country, and they certainly don't want us challenging the very core system that we're a part of and continue to participate in.
Let me read this chat from Fredia M. Butler. She says, those in power must emphasize what they have done, like the items on the Build Back Better plan. We need to stress that message. Too many are too quiet. I think she's talking about that's a whole nother subject and that I've got to address, about the communications or the lack thereof of the Democratic Party, with my good friend and communications advertising professor, Dr. Judy Foster Davis. because that's what that really gets into for sure. It was one other thing, Danielle, that and see, I didn't. Gosh, it was something. Oh, I know what it was that I forgot to ask you. When we were chatting, you were talking about how, and I didn't know this, that in South Africa
Mhm.
they had, when they changed their system and when Mandela came into office and all of that, they did a whole new rebrand with their constitution.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that. And so
Yeah.
I would think too that in many ways, to really set things really right, that Americans need to know more about our history and the Constitution and all that, because I really do think a lot of our problem is the misinformation and the lack of education that we have in our schools on just the core basics, right? And then I thought, well,
Mhm.
that makes sense. If you really are really going to make real change, fundamental change, you've got to really look at the laws of which govern you to change them so that, like you say, with this critical race theory situation, so that everybody is encompassed under the system, right?
Mhm.
Some kind of
Yeah, I
way.
mean, it's, the United States, it always seemed like, and it still certainly is now, seemed like a non-starter to reconceptualize and rewrite the Constitution. And to be clear, right, anything, right, any constitution, any um, legal system, right, is invented, right? The one that we're in is an invention. Um, we treat these things as sacred, um, and and but they are inventions. And they're always going to be a product of the politics of their time, right? They're going to include the people who are in power and they're going to exclude the people who are not in power. I mean, that is
Mhm.
really the constant. I think what, South Africa was trying to do post apartheid was to, right, create a new system that recognize, right, Indigenous South Africans as true citizens of the country. Um, and um, that process still happened in a way that reinforced a lot of the same kinds of power dynamics. So I'm not saying that it's a that doing something like that would be a fix, right? I would say that the South African Constitution, as it stands now, is much better than the apartheid era constitution, and right, the same kinds of racialized and classed and same groups of marginalized peoples who were marginalized under apartheid still struggle today, right?
Mhm.
The struggles are, and different classes of them, just like in the United States, continue to fight for recognition under this new constitution or newer constitution. Um, but I think the United States sort of patching together through amendments, um, you know, shifts to its legal and political regime that allow for openings here and there, um, really, does little and has very little sort of transformative power to the status quo of the general, right? Like raced and classed social and political structure of the country. And I don't know what I don't know what the alternative would be. I think this, but I point to South Africa just as an example of a recognition, at least, right, at that point, at the
Mhm.
end of apartheid, that they could not continue under
Mhm.
that same regime, right?
Mhm.
A recognition that, like, something fundamentally had to change about how the political and legal system was structured if apartheid was to end, apartheid as they knew it was to end.
But you know
Yeah,
what? They also acknowledged it. And I think that's one of our great sins in America. We don't even want to acknowledge slavery.
right,
You know, we don't want to acknowledge the very things that built this country, made this country wealthy. They're having a cow over the 1619 project
mhm,
and anything that is they're calling everything about learning Black history critical race theory, which we have debunked that that's not what it means at all. But they've used that terminology just from a marketing standpoint. The GOP has because they're so adept at messaging, you
right,
know,
right.
and so they've used that as a weaponizing term because it sounds good and everybody can at least repeat it and pronounce it.
Right. And there's no, I mean, but to say nothing, right, of the lack of um uh initiative and strategy around uplifting those stories from the liberals, from the left, from the Democratic side,
Hmm.
however you want to call it.
Hmm.
Um, it's not just the outcries, right, and the booming voices of the GOP spouting nonsense. It's the
Hmm.
silence, right?
Right.
It's the relative silence on the other side and lack of strategy to actually embrace this narrative,
Well,
right? It's
why do you think that is? I just don't
they're all
understand it.
implicated, right? They're all implicated. Like, I think that there are clear differences between the Democrats and the GOP. They're pronounced at this moment.
Uh-huh.
But fundamentally, a lot of these folks, what they have in common is their whiteness. They have in common this history, this system that has benefited them. And
Mhm.
so, I think even those who might want to be somewhat outspoken, right, get
Mhm.
shushed into moderation by those who are also afraid of a change in the status quo. They're just not as extreme, right? And so
Mhm.
I mean, there's so much going on, right? We could talk
Right.
all day about it, but I don't think they have a whole lot riding on creating an inclusive society for all of us either on the Democrat side. So we have people who are fervently against, and we have people who have lukewarm to tepid, right? Like support
Which
of
is no
yeah,
support as
which is
far as
no
I'm
support, right?
concerned.
So
Yeah.
it's really not and so I mean, that is why the GOP keeps winning despite being loud and wrong and just stupid at times. I mean, just
Mhm.
like blatant falsehoods. It doesn't matter.
Right.
The truth doesn't matter. We can spin any story into anything.
Right.
I mean, my God, and if you can't fight that, right?
Yeah.
If you can't find a way to fight that, then
What's
um,
wrong with us? And
yeah.
it's
So
so for me it's so frustrating, but I had not thought about it from that standpoint that obviously because it really doesn't matter to those that are truly in power, even on the Democratic side, they don't feel the pain of it. So it's sort of like, we can still play checkers and not really worry about it. But yet, Black women on our backs,
yeah.
we're getting them elected. We are doing everything. We are doing all of the heavy lifting. And I guess it's just going to take us being real loud and more boastful. We're going to have to be louder and as impolite as the QAnon people are to make our voices heard and just be as ridiculous, be just as loud, be ridiculously smart. How's
Right.
that? Maybe we've got to do something
Mhm.
because we are losing the war on the messaging left and right. Listen, if you guys are listening in from YouTube or whatever, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button and share this video. You can share it on Facebook as well, but please hit the like button and subscribe, please, 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 and share the video. It costs you nothing. It's it's free, and it's a way to help the channel. Okay, we got another chat here from Latrice. It says, if somebody wants to tell on themselves, who am I to stop them? If the GOP wants to be loud and wrong, I'm not going to stop them from broadcasting their willful ignorance for everyone to see. I know, but here's the thing. Because we've got these QAnon people that literally, that's what Josh Hawley was barking when he kept doing that whole thing about with Ketanji Brown Jackson. He kept laser focusing in on a case that was a porn case, and the QAnon people believe that there is this great massive what do you call it, sex dungeon, not sex dungeon, but sex trafficking, child molestation type of thing going on. And so he was saying that narrative to those people who are feeding into that stuff. And see, he's going to use all of that political theater during Ketanji Brown Jackson's hearings is all set up. They're going to use it for ads. It's going to use it for ads. Let's see. Which, gosh, my thing isn't working. Okay. Hawley's dog whistles are set up for 2024. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And Black women in artificial intelligence, loyalty without reward. Oh, I know what she's saying now. She's saying our loyalty, meaning Black women's loyalty, and what is our reward? I guess they're going to tell us, well, you got Kamala Harris. That's what they're going to tell us. That's your reward. And you got Ketanji Brown Jackson. And don't say we didn't do anything for you. That's what they're going to say to us, Black women in artificial intelligence. They're going to say that to us. But what we have to do is be smart enough and bold enough to say that is not enough. That is absolutely not enough. And we have to just get down, get funky with it, I guess, because being nice isn't working. It works if you're going for the Supreme Court justice. You know, you got to play cool. And our girl played it. She played the best kind of cool that anybody else could play cool. Because we all knew that look and that big sigh that she gave, you know, when she, at one point, I forget who she was talking to at that point. Somebody even asked her about her religiosity. And that's against the Constitution. And in any normal job interview, which this essentially was, where do you ask anyone what is their level of religion? What God do they serve? That's illegal.
Right.
I mean, there was just so much crap, you know. And I think all of these nuggets that I'm bringing out should be in somebody's ads right now. Let's see. Here's another. But the neighborhoods, education system, healthcare system, etc., remains the same. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Oh, well, I think what that means is like despite right, like despite these shifts, I mean, I don't want to read too much into it, but despite these shifts after, you know, it's been 60 years, right, since right, since the Black Freedom Movement, and which I just want to emphasize, right, required breaking the law, right? It required, you know, they call it civil disobedience. And it was breaking the law, right? It was going against the rules of the system. And so so what got us even to where we are now, right, was moving ourselves out and beyond the boundaries of what the state said that we could do, right? And even despite that and those gains, you end up, right, with, as Black women in artificial intelligence was saying, right? Very similar kinds of outcomes in neighborhoods, education systems, and healthcare system. Um, and what I want to say is that the GOP is trying to usher in a different kind of political system in the United States, right? That is what this insurrection is about, right? That is
Mhm.
what Trump's election and the GOP's backing of him and folks associated and affiliated with him or folks like him. And he's really, he's had some usefulness in that, even, and had, ways that he could benefit from them. But there are folks who are true ideologues, right? Who really want a different kind of system, who want to revert back
Mhm.
to the system we had prior to even 100 years ago, right?
Mhm.
And they're fighting tooth and nail for that system, right? They're fighting within, right, in the halls of our government, and um, fighting many, many more masses of them, right? Like fighting outside of that space.
Mhm.
And my question is, where is our vision for the system that we want? We're still
Right.
trying to preserve this thing that, even in the best of times, has us with very similar outcomes. What's
Right.
the thing that we're actually fighting for, tooth and nail for,
Right.
instead of like defending the same thing? And so
Right.
I think that's the thing that's hard, right?
Mhm.
Because however long, loud and wrong and dumb they sound, they still are winning, which doesn't
I
like
know,
is
that's the
absurd,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
And they will win because they are standing in convictions that um, may sound like they make no sense, right, to the rest of us, but certainly are reaching people,
Mhm.
right, and ultimately, right, like the aim is to have the effect to preserve power for them, even when they're not in the majority anymore, right, even
Mhm.
when this
Yeah.
country is no longer majority white. And so that's, I think that to me is the hardest thing about um, so much emphasis on voting, right?
Mhm.
Sure, we have to vote, right? That is like the minimal thing, right?
Mhm.
The other thing that we have to have is some kind of vision for what kind of other system that we want for ourselves.
Well, maybe we
And
we
that's
we
yeah,
focus on the vote, and then we have somebody in the back office working on the other part, because we listen, for sure, if we don't vote, we don't get nothing. But for sure, if we vote and be on the back office, in the back, in the booth, in the corner in the dark, doing our little strategizing and working on some things, then maybe we'll win. We gotta win. We
yeah,
got to. We have to, because to think about going back beyond the way my grandmother lived, and when I remember, when I told her I was moving south, she was so angry with me. Your great grandmother, she had a fit. You don't know nothing about that south. What you going south for? She hated it. She just was like, you don't go south. So it's very interesting. Latrice Davis says, "Good trouble," in the words of John Lewis. That's right. That's right. That's right. Uh, I agree with Danielle on that point. Voting in a democracy is like showing up to work on time. It's the least we can do. Yep.
yeah,
And
it is.
uh let me see. Strategy first, then vote. Well, I agree and disagree with you, Black women in AI. We have to strategically think about how we're voting, and then in the back office, we got to strategically think about what it is that we want to change this thing. But and I think we can't talk all our business. When we're strategically thinking about what else it is that we want, I think you can't have moles in the room, and you got to be a little quiet. You got to keep your stuff on the down low a little bit, because everybody grinning in your face are not your friend. And as we well know, with Tim Scott, Candace Owens, name some others, they do not, they look like us, but they don't love us and they don't love themselves. When you go to the grocery store, you have to pay for the food before you leave the store. Okay. Latrice, keep your cards close to the vest. Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, those of you that are on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Share the video. Tell your friends or whatever. Next Sunday, we're going to take I'm going to take a much needed break from the show and everything else. And Danielle, I oh, here, Judy has a comment. You guys had so many comments. Nobody wants to come on camera, I see. Okay, the vote has to align with the strategy. We also have to play the long game like the Republicans do. Absolutely. 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 Okay, so everyone, share the video so that we can have more great discussions. You guys know of any great candidates, I would love to talk to them. I'm going to do a couple of posts about some candidates that I know of on my social media pages that we need to be paying attention to. Our girl in Georgia, our guy in Texas, our girl in Georgia, Stacey Adams, our guy in Texas,
Abrams.
our other two guys in Georgia, Warnock and Ossoff, he's not up for re-election this time, right? No, he's not. But it's Warnock. Warnock is, because he worries me to death in my emails. I get a ton of emails from him. And I tell you, in Florida, we have, what's the lady's name? Val Demings.
Mm-hmm.
And in North Carolina for Senate, we've got the wonderful Sherry Beasley. Is it Beasley, Danielle?
Beasley. Mm-hmm.
Beasley, yes. Some people will get the vote and only show up 4 years later to listen to the yeah, but that's why this show exists. I mean, in my heart, honest to God, I started this show on a wing and a prayer. And I mean, it's just because I want people to focus on strategically voting and thinking about what you're doing, all of that good stuff. Hopefully it makes you think. That's what the show is about. You got to think. Judy, Danielle's a brilliant young woman. Good. Oh, that's Judy Foster Davis. Okay. Oh, Raymond. Oh, good conversation. Thank you, Raymond. You guys, it's been great. Danielle, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you. And everybody, thank you. Have a wonderful week and a beautiful Easter, and I'll see you after that. Okay? Have a good evening. Bye. Bye, everyone.